forward to the cloud and start the summary. So, all right,
Okay, good.
take it over, Francis.
Well, hello, friends. Welcome to this 72nd webinar on the Secret Doctrine. This completes our 6th year together. I know a few of you have been here from the very beginning. How time flies, huh? So this webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheading Maury Federation Webinars, then Webinar Series in Progress. All episodes of this, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, and the Treatise on Cosmic Fire series are also available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald and the webinar series you'd like to view. You can also join any of these webinars on the homepage of Maury Federation, mauryfederation.com, and they're listed in the upper left-hand corner here. Okay, this month, and here, let me adjust the screen as you see it a little bit. There we go, that should be better. So this month in Old Diary Leaves, Colonel Olcott visits the annual floating festival at Mylapore Temple, which, as you can see by these images, is still held every year. So could we get a reader for this, please?
I'll start off. On the 19th occurred the annual floating festival at the Mylapore Temple Hang, and we went to see it. It's a very striking picture of Indian national life. Symbolically, it typifies the floating of Vishnu on the face of the waters at the beginning of the Manvantara for a new cosmic period. The ascending steps on the four sides of the tank, which mount from the water's brim, are lit up with a shurigas, or clay lamps, and the small temple at the tank's center blazes with light, while its white stucco of Shunem is turned into the semblance of old ivory by the soft light of a silvery moon. On a raft of catamaran fishing boats that has been prepared by the coast fishermen as an act of time-honored feudal service, the temple idol has been placed in a small pagoda covered with glittering tinsel.
So here's the temple idol. As you can see here, it's Vishnu riding a lion. So can we get a reader, please?
Vivian, can you read that for us, please?
Its hereditary attendant, Brahmans, naked to the waist, but with two white cloths, one wrapped about them from the waist downward, the other folded into a strip and laid across the shoulders, chant slokas. Standard bearers wave their quaint banners. Devadasis, or temple nautch girls, sway before the idol in graceful motions. Coloured fires of all bright hues blaze at the corners of the raft. Musicians waken the echoes with their strident sounds, and the floating raft is poled 7 times around the tank, in the presence of a vast multitude of people who watch it from the bank, the disturbed water reflecting back the while the shining splendor of the earthly lamps and fires, and the silver radiance of the moon and stars far up in the blue vault. Anything more picturesque in the way of a human festival would be hard to find.
So the tank is actually this huge man-made, it's almost like a lake, but it's very regular, four-sided, quite large. Yeah. Okay. Last time we continued our study of the interim chapter, additional facts and explanations concerning the globes and monads. We're probably going to move out of this chapter today. We've been at it about a year, learning all about chains and globes and rounds and the life wave and the root races, that type of thing. Um, so last time we looked at an old commentary, which teaches that every atom, hang on a sec. That every atom, which means every unit of consciousness, has for its goal to pass into the fourth kingdom in nature, to become a human being. For only through the human kingdom can the liberation into the spiritual realms be realized. We then learned about the ethereal nature of the first root race, which occurred through projection by the lunar Petries onto denser but still ethereal planes of their bhutas or doubles, thereby beginning the long process of densification over the next two root races. The old commentary simply states the inner, now concealed man was then the external man. But even after developing dense physical bodies, humanity was not endowed with mind until the middle of the third root race. Thus, quote, the monad which became human is not the man, meaning not yet overshadowed by the manasaputras, and thus not a true human being. As a result of the densification of the human kingdom, similar changes in densification occurred in the animal and plant kingdoms. In other words, the animal and plant keep pace with the human level of ethereality on each globe. The causal kingdom is the human in all instances. We then learned about the dumb races, quote unquote, dumb races, composed of half human, half animal creatures who we're told will find their way into the human kingdom long before the door opens for the next wave from the animal kingdom. And she gets into describing just how these sort of anomalies that are called anthropoids, how they will make their way into the human kingdom in the next couple of root races, rather than having to wait an entire round. HPB then describes the veiled connection between the illicit group of half-humans and the veneration for Hanuman and simians in general. Evidently, this whole mythology veils this event that occurred in the early part of the third root race, where you had these half-man, half-animal creatures created, and Hanuman is a kind of symbol for this. And this takes us up to where we left off last time. So if we could get a reader for this next paragraph, please.
And Veronica, can you read that for us, please?
Hello.
Hello. Could you read for us?
Yes.
Thank
The
you.
cycle of metapsychosis for the human mother is closed, for we are in the fourth round and the fifth root race. The reader will have to bear in mind, at any rate, one who has made himself acquainted with esoteric Buddhism, that the standard which follows in this book and book 2 speak of the evolution of our fourth round only. The latter is the cycle of the turning point after which matter, having reached its lowest depth, begins to strive onward and to get spiritualized with every new race and with every fresh cycle. Therefore, the student must take care not to see contradiction where there is none, as in esoteric Buddhism, rounds are spoken of in general, while here only the fourth or our present round is meant. Then it was the work of formation. Now it is the reformation and evolutionary perfection. Finally, to close this chapter, I named various but unavoidable misconceptions we must refer to a statement in esoteric Buddhism, which has produced a very fatal impression upon the minds of many Theosophists. One unfortunate sentence from the word just referred to is constantly brought forward to prove the materialism of the doctrine. On page 48, fifth edition, the author, referring to the progress of organism on the globes, says that the mineral kingdom will no more develop the vegetable. Then the earth was able to develop man from the ape till it received an impulse.
Sorry, I had myself muted. So mostly we're not going to have to explore this because it's talking a lot about the book Esoteric Buddhism by A.P. Sennett, which had recently just come out, and there were a number of mistakes in it. This whole theosophical movement was unfolding very fast at this time in the mid 1880s. So, Secret Doctrine was written in 88, I believe, Esoteric Buddhism in 85. So, but certain mistakes were made, and they did have to be updated. Ostensibly, that's the whole purpose of this particular interim chapter, but there's also a lot of very useful information just in general. So a couple of things, but we're not going to get into a line by this because she finds it necessary to correct these ideas that came out in that book. And we're no longer conditioned in our understanding of theosophy by that book by A.P. Sennett. But so metempsychosis is the transition from the animal to the human. In its broader meaning, it's transition from any kingdom to another kingdom. But in this meaning, it means from the animal man to the human. And of course, we know the door was closed. We read about that last time in the middle of the Atlantean root race, right in the very middle of the entire Earth scheme, right at the midway point. And that door was closed so that no more animals could move into the fourth kingdom of nature. Let's see what else here. Yeah, so the rounds up to the present round was the time of formation. So up till that middle point is an evolutionary period where all kingdoms of nature are being formed. And now it is that of reformation and evolutionary perfection. So the door closes, that which is on the human side of the door is moving towards gaining entry into the fifth kingdom, to becoming soul infused and perfecting their own nature. And I think that'll do it for this.
Francis?
Yeah.
Oh man, I have to find the chat. Okay. I'm sorry, I don't have your other name. It just says Helios Soul Voice. She says, thank you for giving detailed definition of metempsychosis, because she was going to post a question about it. So
Oh, good.
you anticipated well.
Oh, how about that? First time. Okay. Oh, and the other thing here is that from here on, the stanzas developed from this point forward in both volumes of the Secret Doctrine refer only to the fourth round. So we now, it's been a very cosmic development of the solar system in all of its phases leading up to this point. But now the Secret Doctrine, literally from this verse, the next verse that we move into, forwards through the rest of the Secret Doctrine, focuses in on the fourth round only. That's our current round. even that's a very large framework because it includes 7 globes and all the root races on those globes. But it's an important framework to understand. Okay, so next up, can we get a reader, please?
Rudy, can you read that for us, please?
Hear me?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Every round repeats on a higher scale the evolutionary work of the preceding round, with the exception of some higher anthropoids, as just mentioned. The monadic inflow or inner evolution is at an end till the next Manvantara. It can never be too often repeated that the full-blown human monads have to be first disposed of before the new crop of candidates appears on this globe at the beginning of the next cycle. Thus there is a lull, and this is why during the 4th round, man appears on Earth earlier than any animal creation, as will be described.
Thank you. Okay, first, every round repeats on a higher scale the evolutionary work of the preceding round. So evolution is spiralic, revisiting earlier stages of development, but always on a higher turn of the spiral, always with a higher agenda as its goal. And of course, there are spirals within spirals. The evolutionary development of a root race is recapitulated during the following root race, but with a higher goal in mind. The first sub-races of that root race especially revisit that which takes place very much like in the recapitulation in incarnation, where you have to develop the physical and then develop the emotional or astral body, and then eventually develop the mental body. That's even true for a disciple who will then move on to do very important work in a lifetime. Still, that recapitulation is necessary. The same thing is true for a root race, especially the first 3 sub-races are largely involved with reforming the physical aspect, and then in the 4th root race, the emotional and mental aspect is regained, but now at a higher level than in the previous root race, and writ large on the previous globe or in the previous chain. So the same can be said about the arc of development for each globe, round, and chain. An analogy is to consider the waves and the tides, with the height of the waves representing the gains made within one root race, and the high tide and low tide representing the gains made during an entire round, or can even extend it during an entire chain. So, at high tide, you still have the same waves that represent minor changes, but they're representing the gains made during a single root race. Next, with the exception of some higher anthropoids, as just mentioned, the monadic inflow or inner evolution is at an end until the next Manvantara. Monadic inflow through the kingdoms is always arrested at the midpoint of a chain, so that the life waves that have reached the human stage by the middle of the 4th root race of the 4th round can, during the last 3 root races, develop towards entrance into the 5th kingdom of nature. We talked about that already. Next, it can never be too often repeated that the full-blown human monads have to be first disposed of before the new crop of candidates appears on this globe at the beginning of the next cycle. So ultimately, quote unquote, full-blown human monads are those that have integrated their threefold lower sheaths and are preparing for initiation. Having to be first disposed of refers to entrance into the fifth kingdom, clearing the slate for fourth kingdom incarnation. The quote, new crop of candidates that will appear on this globe at the beginning of the next cycle refers to this globe D, Earth, in the next round, when a new, more advanced corporeal humanity will be individualized. Okay, any thoughts or questions? You know, these webinars are always better with participation. So anytime you have a comment or question, please just speak up. Okay, and finally, thus there is a lull. And this is why during the fourth round, that's our current round, man appears on earth earlier than any animal creation, as will be described. So it's a strange sentence. The lull is caused by the closing of the door on the animal kingdom. Therefore, no new kingdoms are advancing into the human kingdom, right? That's the lull. The doctrine that humanity appears on earth earlier than any animal directly challenges our current scientific belief, which was largely spawned by Darwinism. The theosophical man before animal doctrine has its roots in the teaching that the life wave of monads, which achieved the stage of germinal humanity in the first three rounds, that life wave appears on earth before any of the lower kingdoms actually manifest. And that, of course, includes the animal kingdom. Can we get a reader for this?
Sure. Magda's got her hand up. And Magda, after you ask your question and you're finished talking to Francis about it, if you would please read.
Yes, sure. My question regards the previous photograph that you just turned to this one. If you could, yes. I don't know what anthropoids are really, and also if you could go more into the concept of this pause, of this lulling in the
Sure.
on the full-blown monads that have to be disposed. I really don't understand this.
Okay, I'll try to make it clear. This is a kind of a tricky statement to figure out. First of all,
Yeah.
anthropoid, as used by HPB, you know, she's kind of coined the word in a specific way, and it represents the illicit mating of early sub-races of the third root race, which was before Lemurian times, before the Manasaputras, who are those beings who represent those solar beings that represent the soul aspect, before they acquiesce to overshadow humanity. Before that time, what are called they were mindless in the except for in basic instinct. That group, those early subraces, mated with the animals of that time, and as a result was created a half man, half animal, which is what we've been talking about for the last little bit. And it's that phenomenon HPB refers to as anthropoids. Okay, I imagine the term exists in science and means something altogether, means human-like, I think, in terms of general usage, but HPB has a very specific.
Okay, I understand. And I never heard it expressed as anthropoids, and I didn't know that before the Manapa Sutras, acquiescence to to
Well,
help
it's,
humanity.
yeah, it's not those, it's not that humanity that's the anthropoids. It's what was created when they mated with the animal of that time.
Okay. Okay.
See, now that doesn't create an offspring, but in the early subraces of the Lemurian, of the third root race, they weren't really Lemurian yet. It did create these half man, half animal, and it created a big headache for the hierarchy because they had to figure out how to deal with this. And she actually ends up talking a lot about that. As to your other question, what the lull is, I'll just repeat what I said, which is that there was the normal process up until the middle of the fourth root race of the fourth round, which was in in Atlantean times, is that there was a steady passage from one kingdom to the next. The lull occurred when the door was closed to the animal kingdom, because there was a fundamental shift in the purpose of the of evolution. It was here described in this previous thing where it says, then it was the work of formation up until the time of the lull, up until that midpoint. Now it's that of reformation. It's written in light gray, but you can read it here. And evolutionary perfection. So it was an evolutionary period where the kingdoms reverently moved up through the kingdoms, but as a result of the closing of the door, this so-called lull occurs because no more animal man is allowed into the animal kingdom. They have to now wait until the next round, altogether the next round. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you. Could we draw an analogy somehow between the times that we are living today and what happened in the periods you're describing in Lemuria?
In what way?
An analogy in
What's happening?
regarding,
Go ahead.
yeah, the evolution that happened with this lulling. I'm trying to figure out how and
How this might apply?
excuse me?
How this might apply today, you mean?
Yes, how might apply as an analogy, as a cyclical analogy, as what happens today with the war against war, so-called.
Well,
And what happened on
it's actually represents a different part of the cycle. This is a unique event that only happens,
okay.
this idea of the lull, a unique event that happens at the absolute midpoint of a cycle, right? Where the entire focus is shifting from developing the physical aspect to reforming, to use her words, to reforming the evolutional or the fifth kingdom in nature. What we're going through now is just, that's a whole webinar, isn't it? Trying to determine the nature of what's happening is happening. I think we're under this extraordinary vibratory influence from the hierarchy as a result of so many rays being in manifestation. And it's been incredibly stimulating. And that type of stimulation, also the fact that we're at the end of the Piscean time and the beginning of the Aquarian age, creates a tremendous division. And there's a crystallization of the old. That, as well as the influence of all these rays, is creating the world situation we see today, where you have extremes on both sides. Great good is being done, and progress being made in so many areas, and yet we see so much violence, so much disruption. So, but that's not really the same kind of event as what we're seeing here.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much for your answer.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so could we get a reader here? Well, I think you were going to read, weren't you?
Yes,
The
Megan.
evolutionary law compelled the lunar fathers to pass in their monadic condition through all the forms of life and being on this globe. But at the end of the third round, they were already human in their divine nature and were thus called upon to become the creators of the forms destined to fashion the tabernacles of the less progressed monads, whose turn it was to incarnate.
Okay, let me see if there's anything here I need to underscore. Lunar fathers are the Dhyani Chohans who projected from their own essence the early forms of humanity. They're also called lunar Petries, here literally lunar fathers, which is what Petri means. This is all review. We've all through this interim chapter, we've been looking at this. Yeah. Okay, we'll take a look at just one sentence from the next passage. Next, which reads, "But what the occultists have never admitted, nor will they ever admit, is that man was an ape in this or in any other round, or that he ever could be one, however much he may have been ape-like." You have to remember context here. This is 1888. It hadn't been that long since Darwin's theories had come on the scene and been sort of universally accepted by science, though there were many holdouts. And so there was a lot of reaction, a lot of awareness first of those concepts. And of course, it's still the accepted premise. It's so though humankind may have had an ape-like appearance in the third round, as well as during earlier Lemurian subraces, it was not the ape of the animal kingdom, but a passing stage of outer appearance in the development towards the present human appearance. And we'll talk about this a little later as well. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please? Yeah.
Okay. First, Helios Soul Voice, she wants to know if you could please briefly define what Petries are.
Yeah, Petries is like an ancestor, is basically what the Hindu philosophy in general, the mythology, the religion is closest in many ways to the ageless wisdom. As a result of that, many of the terms are used from the Hindu. And so a lunar Petri means the ancestors, but these ancestors are strictly from a physical point of view. That is to say, they developed the form aspect of the human kingdom, and this always happens in the first 3.5 cycles, whatever those cycles may be. Right, the form aspect is particularly focused on, and then through the last half of the third into the fourth, you have the beginning of the monastic principle, which is perfected in the fifth of any cycle, right? And then from that point on, from the fifth through the seventh, you have the development of the spiritual aspect. Okay. Okay, can we get a reader, please?
She asks if, are they actually the lunar fathers?
Why lunar? Is that why she's asking?
I don't know.
Yeah,
Please go
lunar
ahead and
Petries.
ask your, yes, she says.
Okay, so Petri means father. Lunar means oriented towards the sublunary worlds, which has to do with strictly the form aspect, strictly the material development, and the body evolution of it's really involution, but the evolution of the form aspect. And it's these quote unquote lunar petries that are responsible for this development, as opposed to solar petries who come from the soul aspect and develop through their overshadowing the higher qualities of the human being, the access to soul and eventually to the monad. And as well, they're very influential in the development of the personality. In fact, without a soul, you don't come to that stage of having an integrated personality. That is really the influence of the soul. But before that overshadowing, it is really a physical development. And the mind that is developed is purely instinctual. At one point, HPB describes it as cunning, in the same way that an animal can develop a certain cunning, but not the thinking mind as we know it. Okay? Anyone
All right,
else?
Jesus, thank you. All right.
Okay.
All right, Scott, can you read for us, please?
To those who would confront the occultists with these lines from esoteric Buddhism, quote, "It is enough to show that we may as reasonably, and that we must, if we would talk about these matters at all, conceive a life impulse giving birth to mineral form, and as of the same sort of impulse concerned to raise a race of apes into a race of rudimentary men," unquote. To those who bring this passage forward as showing decided Darwinism, the occultists answer by pointing to the explanation of the master, Mr. Sinnett's teacher, which would contradict these lines, were they written in the spirit attributed to them. A copy of this letter was sent to the writer, together with others, 2 years ago, 1886, with additional marginal remarks, to quote from in The Secret Doctrine. It begins by considering the difficulty experienced by the Western student in reconciling some facts previously given with the evolution of man from the animal, that is, from the mineral, vegetable, and animal kingdoms, and advises the student to hold to the doctrine of analogy and correspondences. Then it touches upon the mystery of the devas and even gods, having to pass through states which it is agreed to refer to as immetallization, inherbation, inzuinization, and finally incarnation, and explains this by hinting at the necessity of failures, even in the ethereal races of Diane Chohans.
That may be the only time you say inzuination in this lifetime.
Probably so, as well as the others.
Yeah, not to mention. Okay, a lot of this we don't need to go through. Again, it deals with the book, Esoteric Buddhism. But, anytime you have a question, something jumps out at you, I'm happy to cover it. But this last statement refers to that group of Dhyani Chohans, here called gods and devas, that were given the task of reformulating the mineral, plant, animal, and human kingdoms on Globe D, and to the failures within the form aspect only. We're only talking about the form aspect here, as these Dhyanis made their way towards creating successful vehicles for each of these kingdoms. This is also called the first life wave. This particular group of Dhyanis, who are the lunar petries. All of these refer to that same very mysterious group of beings who projected from themselves into denser matter their own essence, and thus formed those earliest root races. Any thoughts or questions? Okay, next up, a letter from the master who was A.P. Sennett's teacher. He was the one that wrote Esoteric Buddhism, and who also advised both HPB and Colonel Olcott. You may remember that Sennett and Olcott and HPB were all very close. They would often travel together. So could we get a reader, please? So this is a letter
Michelle?
from a master of wisdom.
Michelle, can you read this for us, please?
Sure. Concerning this, it says, still, as these failures are too far progressed and spiritualized to be thrown back forcibly from Diane Chohanship into the vortex of a new primordial evolution through the lower kingdoms, after which only a hint is given about the mystery contained in the allegory of the fallen asuras, which will be expanded and explained in Book 2. When karma has reached them at the stage of human evolution, they will have to drink it to the last drop in the bitter cup of retribution. Then they become an active force and cummingly
Commingle.
commingle with the elementals, the progressed entities of the pure animal kingdom, to develop little by little the full type of humanity. These Dayan Chohans, as we see, do not pass through the three kingdoms, as do the lower Petras, nor do they incarnate in man until the third root race. Thus, as the teaching stands, man in the first round and first race on globe D, our Earth, was an ethereal being, a lunar Dhyani as man, non-intelligent but super spiritual and correspondingly on the law of analogy in the first race of the fourth round. In each of the subsequent races, the sub races, he grows more and more into an encased or incarnate being, but still preponderantly ethereal. He is sexless and, like the animal and vegetable, he develops monstrous bodies correspondential with his coarser surroundings.
As she uses strange words, correspondential and preponderatingly, rather, kind of stretching the English. I think commingle is actually spelled with one M. That's why you might have had trouble with that. Okay, first, concerning this, it says, still, as these failures are too far progressed and spiritualized to be thrown back forcibly from Dian Chohanship into the vortex of a new primordial evolution through the lower kingdoms. ... This is a very graphic way of saying that the half human, half animal beings created through illicit coupling in the early Lemurian subraces cannot be denied participation in the fourth kingdom, because at least part of their nature was initiated by those Dian Chohans charged with creating the form aspect of the human kingdom. HP then breaks in to say, after which only a hint is given about the mystery contained in the allegory of the fallen Asuras, which will be expanded and explained in Book 2. The Theosophical Glossary tells us that the term Asura, from the verbal root to breathe, is, quote, employed with frequency in theosophical writings to signify the class of spiritual, intellectual beings called Manasaputras, Kumaras, or Agnishvatas. As a matter of fact, Asuras, Maruts, Rudras, and Daityas are but various ways of describing the intellectual gods, or Manasas, as contrasted with the as yet incompleted devas or suras. So, asura, it means formless, without form, asura. A fallen asura is one who has acquiesced to overshadow a developing personality. This, by the way, this incredible bas-relief is from Angkor Wat. Okay. Two great classes of beings. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. The question is, oops, I lost it. What is PG as signed by
Oh,
this
yeah.
image under the quote?
Right. Yeah, this question comes up about every 10 webinars, and I answer it, but it's a good question, and I'm glad you're asking, because it's the Theosophical Glossary, which is an online. Well, first of all, it originated as a book by de Perucker, who just created this incredible glossary of theosophical terms, and I'm talking about HPV era theosophy. But then it was greatly expanded on in its online edition. So it's here, I'm going to actually come out of the form here to find
I'm
it.
looking up I'm looking it up.
It's here. This is an example of what it looks like. I'll scroll down so you get, and I'll expand your window so you can see this better. So yeah, so this is just most of a computer page that you would see this. So it's now called the Encyclopedic Theosophical Glossary. You can find it under, let's see.
I'm giving the link.
Oh, good. You're giving a link. Good. So but as you see from this, what it is this much expanded on glossary of terms. And what you do is you find, whatever term that is that you're interested in, then you click on that link. Like, for instance, we've been talking about Dhyani Chohan's, right? So you can go here to DIS through DZ, and then you scroll down and you find your term. Let's see if I can spell. I should be able to find this. Oh, oops. Yeah. Let's try here. You go all the way down.
DY.
DY, not DH. Of course. Thank you, Scott.
No, it's DH and then YAN.
DHYHN. That's what I thought it was. That's what I was looking for. DHY. Here we are. Dhyani Chohan. See Dhyani Chohan. So we go down to here. And so then you get this description of, and it's very much based on the theosophy of the 1880s, 90s, and the turn of the century up through about the 20s, where there were a number of authors that wrote, but primarily on HPB's writing. And it gives you these wonderful thumbnail definitions of the terms. Okay, so you've got the link in your chat. And so when you see theosophical or TG written after a quote, this is where it came from. Okay, so let's go back to here. I'll resize my window. This is easy when I'm not doing it in front of people. There we go. All right. Okay, back to here. So we are looking at this incredible bas-relief that depicts these asuras, who you can see the group work. And look at these beings in the background. Aren't they incredible? All with their hands raised and, it's like active intelligence in a sculptor. Okay, any other questions, thoughts? Okay. Yeah, if you study this material on your own, you definitely want to have that theosophical glossary at your fingertips because it's an invaluable resource. Okay, next up. When karma has reached them at the stage of human evolution, we're talking about these quote unquote anthropoids, right? They will have to drink it to the last drop in the bitter cup of retribution. So once these half human, half animal beings begin to fully enter into the human kingdom, they will, the master here teaches us in his letter, have to pay a huge karmic debt, drink it to the last drop in the bitter cup of retribution. We might ask, why is this karma accrued? It seems to me that the action of procreation was not the fault of any of the parties involved. The human was not yet endowed with mind, and as did the animal, thus acted purely out of instinct. The resulting half human, half animal child is even less guilty of any wrongdoing, which is the way we normally think of accruing karma. So for me, this suggests that the karma, the debt that's accrued is not individual karma, but rather racial karma. Okay. Next, then they began an active force. Actually, let's pick this question up before I get into this.
Okay, Tom, go ahead, please.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
I was a bit perplexed whether these falling asuras really refer to those anthropoids, or is this some other event which has some links to it? Because as you said, I don't see any reason for the karma of those. So could it be that she or he is not talking about the anthropoids, but something that happened at the same time?
Well, if there is blame to be assigned, it would be, this opens up the subject a bit, to the Manasaputriyas who refused to overshadow these earliest sub-races of the third root race. They would not enter, is the way the old commentary describes it. Well, the problem being that since they are already physical, this illicit mixing of the kingdoms became possible, right? It could have been prevented by the overshadowing in the Manasaputris earlier than when they finally agreed to come in. This is really esoteric, and you can't find much information on it. So if the blame, the real blame, but you're going to blame Manasaputris, that doesn't really hold either, since they're these solar Davic beings, and probably are beyond the realm of karma, of being able to accrue karma themselves, So, it's quite mysterious. I think it's not about individual karma. It's about this group as a whole then had to undergo a and she describes this a little further on, what they have to endure in order to finally become human. It's described in very esoteric terms, and we'll get there pretty quickly. And that might be the actual nature of the cup of retribution, as she calls it. Any other thoughts about this? Okay, can we get a reader, please?
Okay, hold it just a sec. Helio Soul Voice says, are we touching upon the group that refused to incarnate? I just heard about it.
Yeah, we were just talking about it. The group that refuses to incarnate is actually the group of Manasaputras, which are these solar angels. We call them in modern decayed theosophy. That group, which refused to quote unquote acquiesce to overshadow humanity in these earliest sub races of the third root race. So that's what refusing to incarnate means in that case, right? Does that answer your question?
She said that she heard about it in another series of webinars.
Yeah, it could have been touched on earlier. Yeah, there's many different spiritual disciplines have some version of this. In Christianity, it has to do with the fallen angels and those who stayed in the kingdom of God. And so the fallen angels are not really fallen the way they are normally depicted as being fallen, but rather those who were willing to overshadow humanity so that it could be eventually enter the fifth kingdom in nature, right? And those who refused to do that or stayed with God were not fallen, but they would be the ones, quote unquote, at fault, and that's a dubious thing to get into as well, which resulted in the creation of these half human, half animal creatures that HPB calls anthropoids. Okay, anybody else? All right, can we get a reader? Oh, wait a minute, I'm doing this, aren't I? So, let me catch up here.
He says that seems a complex subject.
Yeah, and it's only partially revealed. She actually gets into it more, and you'll see just how esoteric it is. Then they become an active force and commingle. Oh, this is it. This is where it gets really strange. Then they become an active force. Let me see. Yeah, we're talking about this group of half human, half animals. Then that group, become an active force and commingle with the elementals, the progressed entities of the pure animal kingdom, to develop little by little the full type of humanity. That's a very esoteric statement. So first, the karmic debt is paid, then these anthropoids draw from the progressed elementals associated with the animal kingdom, that is, that which they need to develop fully human characteristics. It's really esoteric. This just touches on a subject that mostly remained hidden, perhaps by drawing on the progressed elementals of the animal kingdom. These anthropoids are able to raise the quality of the substance of their vehicles to a point where they can eventually reincarnate into the human kingdom. There's so little information given here that it's difficult to determine just the result of this drawing on the elementals of the higher animal kingdom. But you have to remember that animal man is really the that final level of the animal kingdom before that animal man was drawn across into the actual human kingdom through overshadowing by the Manasaputris. So possibly it is that drawing on the progressed elementals of that level of animal man, and therefore purifying and you could say upgrading the quality of their own animal nature, so helping to erase the effect of the animal aspect of one of the two parents, where you have the man and the animal. So, but we're just guessing because there's not a lot more information given about this. Next, these beyond, yeah.
Heliosoul Voice asked, does commingle here mean hybridizing?
Let me pull it up. Let me go back here. Does it mean what? Hybridizing? Well, we're looking at a group that is out of form. We're not looking at physical incarnation here, because if you're commingling with the elementals, you're in a more ethereal level, because only at that level would you be able to commingle. And also it's the active, they become an active force. That also suggests an out of form aspect of these half human, half animal beings. And through just mixing, commingling just means mixing. So, bringing the essence of the certain group of elementals that represent the higher qualities of the animal, the progressed entities of the pure animal. I'm guessing, animal man at its highest level, and thereby develop little by little through this probably a very long stage of this commingling with the elementals, gradually develop into the quote unquote full type of humanity. In other words, they can become on the inner side, they will have done the necessary cleansing, purification, and taking out of their nature those lower qualities through this infusion by commingling with the elementals that allows them to incarnate as human beings. Okay.
And then she asks, mixing among the elementals. I don't think she understands that concept.
Well, elementals.
Voice, sorry, I was going to say, if you would like to unmute yourself, you can explain.
Oh, okay. I'm just wondering if this commingling is it hybridizing ethereal beings with the elementals, which could be some type of spiritual hybridization. I'm just making it up, or it is, mixing among the elementals, just coexisting with them, literally. Right? I'm kind of like,
Right.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't think the impact here is on the elemental kingdom. These are actual kingdoms in nature, these elementals. I think the idea is to be able to bring in the qualities that exist of these high elementals, high in relation to the animal kingdom, so as to purify and raise the vibration of this half animal, half man constitution, therefore clear that animal part of the half animal, half man. I too am just guessing here. I don't see any other. I mean, she tells us the end result, which is that eventually develops into the full type of humanity. And we know the beginning, what they are when they enter into it, which is half animal, half man. And the transformative process happens through this mingling with the elementals. But, she doesn't give us any more than that.
I think this is excellent explanation because, the elementals, even written with the capital E, that means might be a higher hierarchy of elementals, then it will explain it all. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We get no footnote. We don't know for sure, but I would agree with you.
Yeah.
She does tell us that it is entities of the pure animal kingdom, the progressed entities. And like I said, what I do with that is associate it with that highest level of, what you could just ask the question, why would commingling with animal elementals help this situation? And the only way that I can see it could is if that it was the animal man, what HPB calls animal man, which was the fully developed human being just before they're overshadowed by the Manasaputras, and therefore sort of brought up to speed so that they could then enter the human group. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Next up, these Dian Chohans, as we see, do not pass through the three kingdoms, as do the lower Petries, nor do they incarnate in man until the third root race. So HPB is here distinguishing the higher type of Dian Chohan, responsible for building and evolving the human, from the lower type of Petries, which evolve the form aspect of the subhuman kingdoms. And so they don't incarnate until the third root race, because that's when humanity, that's where you have this coincidence. That's where the animal kingdom meets the overshadowing devas, the Manasaputras, who then together create the human kingdom. Next, thus, as the teaching stands, man in the first round and first race on globe D, our Earth, was an ethereal being, a lunar dhyani, as man, non-intelligent but super spiritual, and correspondingly, on the law of analogy, in the first race of the fourth round. Okay, we'll get through this. Humanity's lack of intelligence and super spirituality go hand in hand. For lower mind, it is said, is the slayer of the real. And thus, before its mental development, humanity was intrinsically one with its spiritual noumenal source, with those Dhyani Petries who projected them, right, which had this innate high spirituality, but not that spirituality that in much later rounds develops through illumined mind. This teaching also compares the degree of humanity's ethereality on two different globes and rounds, thus giving us some insight, really just a little peek into humanity's progressive density as it passes from one round to the next. Humanity, we're told, was in the first race of the fourth globe of the first round of a similar density to humanity in the first race of the first globe of the fourth round, as shown here. The phrase correspondingly on the law of analogy suggests that this parity is due to the numbers. involved as shown here. In terms of the degree of the density or tenuity of the human form, the master here tells us that 141, first round, fourth globe, first raise, is equivalent to 411, fourth round, first globe, first raise. This suggests that other parities may exist between other rounds, globes, and root races. For example, is it possible that humanity during the second root race of the fourth globe of the second round, or 242, is equivalent in substantive tenuity to the second race of the second globe of the fourth round, or 422? Which, by the way, is the Venus round and root race in the first instance, and the Venus globe and root race in the second. Since these two periods are said to mark first the advent and then the migration of solar angels to our planet, perhaps having the same level of density of the human form helped link these two great events. But it is a kind of key. It's just a tiny little key. Going back here to what he said, what HPB gives, or what this master gave us, that if these two have a corresponding level of form density, then that tells us something about the entire nature of how density progresses in a round, right? It's quite interesting. I found it interesting. It's sort of theosophical nerdism, but Any thoughts or questions about this? Okay. I see a hand.
Trudy, go ahead, please.
Does this mean that in the fifth round, sixth and seventh round, the human becomes less dense?
Yes. Unequivocally, the answer is yes. You can see here the way that it lifts back out of this densest period here. So first of all, we have to look at root race. If you can follow my cursor here, the next root race is already of a more ethereal nature than, no, I'm sorry. I have to keep my terms really clear. The next race on the next globe on this, oh boy, okay. The next globe in our round, which is the fifth globe, we're now on the fourth globe, shown here, right, where my cursor is. On the next globe, that globe will be less dense. And the globe after that will be even less dense until the final seventh globe will be quite etheric. All right. And then when we move to the entire next round, all 7 globes of that round will be less dense than the globes of the densest globe of the fourth round. Now, before we got this information that, here, I'll go back one more because this is the information we actually got. Before we got this information that showed parity between the level of density at this globe and this globe, until we got that information, all we knew was this general sense that it starts very etheric and then moves into denseness and moves back into etheric levels. But this is the first real clue we've had as to a comparative sense of that density. So, you could do the same thing on the way out. Of course, it's not going to be correct in minute detail, but you may be able to say that the same thing would be true these last 3 rounds in terms of tenuity. You know, for instance, is the first root rays of the fourth globe in round 1 similar to the first root race of the fourth globe of round 7, because, you know, it's almost universally showed in parallel here. And we're just talking about the density of the form aspect. Well, there's one chart that HPB gives us where the 7th round is shown slightly higher than the first. The 6th round slightly higher than the 2nd. The 5th slightly higher than the 3rd, and the 4th by itself alone. And these slightly higher represent slightly more ethereal or tenuous. So yeah, that's really about all I can say. There's not absolute detailed information. In fact, this is the closest indicator that I remember HPB giving us about this comparative tenuity. Now, what I made from this is, you know, DK tells us that it was this is the Venus round, and it was through this round that the solar angels came into our Earth scheme, right? And so because of that, and also he tells us that it was this second globe, which is the Venus globe of our 4th round, that Sanat Kumara came to our Earth scheme, right? So I chose to create this possible parity because of those 2 monumental events that occurred, and suggesting that you know, because they had the same level of physical ethereality or tenuity, that they were related in that way. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Okay, finally, in each of the subsequent races and sub-races, he grows more and more into an encased or incarnate being, but still preponderatingly ethereal. I say preponderantly, forget it. He is sexless, and like the animal and vegetable, he develops monstrous correspondential with his monstrous bodies correspondential with his coarser surroundings. So, quote, more into an encased or incarnate being suggests both an increased density of substance as well as more defined outlines. The master here suggests that there is a gradual movement in humanity's size from gigantic but somewhat undefined corporeal borders due to its ethereality to progressively smaller and more dense forms, and that this progression is paralleled by both the animal and the plant kingdoms. Okay. The letter from AP Senate's master continues. Can we get a reader, please?
Marguerite, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Round, he, man, is still gigantic and ethereal, but growing firmer and more condensed in body, a more physical man, yet still less intelligent than spiritual. For mind is a slower and more difficult evolution than is the physical frame. 3, round. He has now a perfectly concrete or compacted body, at first the form of a giant ape, and now more intelligent, or rather cunning, than spiritual. For on the downward arc, he has now reached a point where his primordial spirituality is eclipsed and overshadowed by nascent mentality. 2. In the last half of the third round, his gigantic stature decreases and his body improves in texture, and he becomes a more rational being, though still more an ape than a deva. All this is almost exactly repeated in the third root race of the fourth round. 4 round. Intellect has an enormous development in this round. The hitherto dumb races acquire our present human speech on this globe, on which from the fourth race language is perfected and knowledge increases. At this halfway point of the fourth round, as of the fourth root or Atlantean race, humanity passes the axial point of the minor Manvantara cycle, the world teeming with the results of intellectual activity and spiritual decrease. This is from the authentic letter. What follows are the later remarks and additional explanations traced by the same hand in the form of footnotes.
Thank you. Okay, first up, second round. He, man, is still gigantic and ethereal, but growing firmer and more condensed in body, a more physical man, yet still less intelligent than spiritual. For mind is a slower and more difficult evolution than is the physical frame. This second root race is what is called in the second volume of the Secret Doctrine, the boneless and the sweat-born, both names suggesting non-physicality. The intelligence here described is instinctual and purely a function of the third aspect, for man at this stage is not as yet overshadowed by the soul. I saw a hand before we go on.
Yes, Tom, please go ahead.
I was a little bit wondering about the word spiritual in this context. What does that mean? Because he's less intelligent, his consciousness is not yet evolved, and I always thought that the spiritual would more reflect on the level of consciousness you have. So it's quite a strange what is meant by spiritual.
I leave the Father's house, that concept, right, is that an initial evolutionary stage, which is represented by this projection by these lunar Dhyani Chohans of their form, right? At that stage, they're actually made up of very high subplane matter. And it is of a very highly, of a high innate spiritual nature, but there's no mind, there's no self-development, no self-reflection, no self-realization whatsoever, right? It's the spirituality that is innate in what you might call virgin substance, right?
Yeah, so it's not the spiritually we are aiming at when we
Not at
evolve in
all.
consciousness. It's the starting point, and that's why it's a little bit misleading for me. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not our normal use at all of the becoming spiritual, right? Because it's not the spirituality you gain on the evolutionary path. But we've all been there. It's what we were, when we were one with the monad, before we moved into this whole process, this whole journey, right? Okay. Okay. So yeah, I'm just catching up. Yeah, we're about to read this. We were just talking about the second root race, and the point Tom was bringing up, yet still less intelligent than spiritual. So mind is developing, but it's really that innate spiritual quality that dominates the nature of humankind in the second round, right? And here this is from the Theosophical Glossary, which we were just looking at, and the entry on the second root race, which is what we're looking at here. And that's here in our fourth round on Globe D. Okay, can we get a reader, please?
Yes. Kira, can you read that for us, please?
Second root race. Like the first root race of the present round on Globe D of the Earth chain, the second was astral, though somewhat more concreted, physicalized, physicalized or materialized. The bodies were unlike what is now regarded as human, bearing but vaguely the human outline of a gelatinous, filamentoid, jelly-like nature, as yet without evolved bones, organs, hair, or true skin. Reproduction was by budding, as occurs in some lower organisms today. About the middle of the race, these buds became numerous, and the process became modified to one analogous to the casting off of spores or seeds, or to the exuding of drops of vital sweat. These beings were mindless and unmoral, as opposed to immoral. Innocent, guided unconsciously by their spiritual instincts, nevertheless, largely under the sway of lower rather than spiritual impulses, somewhat like the animals of today. For as yet, no intellectual fire from the Manas Putras, sons of mind, had been communicated to them, so that as yet there was no working bridge of mentally between spirit and matter in them.
Yeah, of mentality. So yeah, you can get, I think, Tom, this probably answers your question a little better too, right? Mindless and unmoral, innocent, guided unconsciously by their spiritual instincts, right? And yet, because they're on this involutional journey, they're largely under the sway of the lower rather than their spiritual impulses. Okay, so let's look at the note, which occurs directly beneath this paragraph we just read about the second round. This is the master's appended note on this second round. Could we get a reader, please?
Janet, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. Am I loud enough?
Yes.
Okay. 1, quote, the original letter contained general teaching, a bird's eye view, and a particularized nothing. To speak of physical man while limiting the statement to the early rounds would be drifting back to the miraculous and instantaneous coats of skin. The first nature, the first body, the first mind on the first plane of perception. On this first globe in the first round is what was meant. For karma and evolution have centered in our make such strange extremes. From different natures marvelously mixed. The natures of the 7 hierarchies or the classes of Petries and Dihan Shohans, which compose our nature and bodies, are here meant.
Thank you. So first, the term coats of skin comes from an early Jewish group called the Alim or Aleim, and refers to later stages of physicality. Let's read about that. Can we get a reader, please?
Gordon, can you read that for us, please?
As the coats of skin of men thickened, and they fell more and more into physical sin, the intercourse between the physical and the ethereal divine man was stopped. The veil of matter between the two planes became too dense for even the inner man to penetrate. In the beginning, every class and family of living species was hermaphrodite and objectively one-eyed. In the animal, its form was as ethereal, astrally, as that of man, before the bodies of both began to evolve their coats of skin, to evolve from within, without a thick coating of physical substance or matter with its internal physiological mechanism. The third eye was primarily, as in man, the only seeing organ. Physical causation supervenes immediately on the assumption of coats of skin, i.e., the physiological equipment in general. The forms of men and mammalia previous to separation of the sexes are woven out of astral matter and possess a structure utterly unlike that of the physical organisms which eat, drink, digest, etc.
Thank you. Okay. Next, the miraculous and instantaneous coats of skin refers to the Judeo-Christian doctrine of the sudden and fully developed appearance of Adam and Eve, which is neither scientifically nor theosophically sound. Next, when speaking of physical man, while limiting the statement to the early rounds, it is the first nature, the first body, the first mind on the first plane of perception, on the first globe, in the first round that was meant. In other words, though he, the master, used the word physical in his first draft, what he actually meant, he's telling us, was the ethereal body and mind of humanity on the first globe of the first round. Physical being a relative term compared to the forms of the lunar Petries who projected their form aspect into relatively denser substance. We might ask, what is the, quote, first plane of perception cited here? Decay's list of sensory capabilities extends all the way up to the Atmic plane. So just what plane of sensory activity the first root race was working on is not given. We did have that in this quote about the third eye, and that this was used in lieu of any kind of outer physiological eyes. That gives us some clue as to the nature of perception. Finally, and most obtusely, the master writes, for karma and evolution have, quote, centered in our make such strange extremes from different natures, marvelously mixed. HBB's footnote explains what the master means by such strange extremes from different natures, marvelously mixed. Quote, the natures of the seven hierarchies or classes of Petries and Dian Chohans, which compose our nature and bodies are here meant. The statement refers to the extraordinary diversity of the sevenfold classes of Dian Chohans and Petries, which are involved in the sheath building of a human being from the monad to the physical body. In this, there is some correlation with the seven creative hierarchies given by DK. Next, third round, he has now a perfectly concrete or compacted body. At first, the form of a giant ape, and now more intelligent, or rather cunning than spiritual. For on the downward arc, he has now reached a point where his primordial spirituality is eclipsed and overshadowed by nascent mentality. So perfectly concrete may still mean physically etheric. It's hard to know for sure. The third root race has a natural resonance with the third round. Primordial, remember the number association between rounds and races. Primordial spirituality, as we've now talked about, means the innate connection, the unobfuscated, innate connection unobfuscated by mind with the lunar Dhyani creators of that subrace. Can we get a reader for this, please?
Yes. The occult doctrine is, we think, more logical. It teaches a cyclic, never varying law in nature, the later having no personal, special design, but acting on a uniform plan that prevails through the whole Manvantaric period and deals with the land worm as it deals with man. Neither the one nor the other have sought to come into being. Hence, both are under the same evolutionary law, and both have to progress according to karmic law. Both have started from the same neutral center of life, and both have to remerge into it at the consummation of the cycle. It is not denied that in the preceding round, man was a gigantic ape-like creature. And when we say man, we ought perhaps to say the rough mold that was developing for the use of man in this round only, the middle or the transition point of which we have hardly reached. Nor was man what he is now during the first 2.5 root races. The point, that point he reached, as said before, only 18 million years ago during the secondary period.
Thanks, Bill. Okay, so hopefully these quotes are helping fill out the picture. Anytime you have any question, where you want to further relate what's being described, please ask. But she adds a few more pieces to the puzzle here. This relation between the third round and the third root race, right? And the nature of the corporeality. Okay, let's take a look at this is another footnote, this time referencing the third round. I'll read this. Restore. He has now reached the point by analogy and as the third root race in the fourth round where his, quote, the angel man's primordial spirituality is eclipsed and overshadowed by nascent human mentality. And you have the true version on your thumbnail. So in the Lemurian root race, human mentality eclipsed his natural status as an angel man, meaning the lunar Dhyani Chohans, not to be confused with the solar angel. This is that those Davic-like beings who projected humanity into denser forms. And so he's now come into into a physicality that to such an extent that this natural connection with the spirituality of the higher angel man has been eclipsed by his slowly developing mind. Okay. Next, in the last half of the third round, his gigantic stature decreases, his body improves in texture, and he becomes a more rational being, though still more an ape than a deva. All this is almost exactly repeated in the third root race of the fourth round. Again, a clue of parody, right? Almost exactly repeated. Okay, so we're talking about ape, again, in outer appearance only, but still human, ape-like, in other words. Let's take a look at the Theosophical Glossary's entry on the third round. Could we get a reader, please?
Yeah, Scott, can you read that for us, please?
Third round. At that period, even the more evolved monads of the lunar chain, representing and leading the human kingdom, had but reached the state of, quote, presentments of men, unquote, having huge ape-like forms. Yet they were not apes in any sense of the word, for what we know now as monkeys and apes were of far later development as partial offsprings from the human stock, which took place during the present fourth round. These third round men were, quote, no fit rupa for the brothers of the fifth, unquote, referring to the fifth class of Manasaputras. At the end of the third round, there were forerunning monads who were already human in nature and characteristic, and who were leading the way towards the true humanity of the fourth round, and therefore were the guides of the less progressed human monads when it became the latter's turn to incarnate during the fourth round. These advanced guard monads are sometimes termed the sons of yoga, as intellectual and moral responsibility appears in the evolving human monads only when mind enters the picture, which occurred for the majority of the human monads only during the third root race of the fourth round. During the third round, few monads had reached the stage of true intellectual and moral responsibility. And during the second round, even these forerunners were themselves unfolding the powers and responsibilities of mind and of choice. Thus, while the third round forerunners may be considered truly human, the great bulk of the human kingdom was still but in the elemental stages of intellectual and moral responsibility. Mind was only just beginning to show itself, and hence the humans were more cunning than intellectual, instinctual rather than spiritual.
Thank you, Scott. This fills in a few more gaps, a little bit more history. Any thoughts, questions about this? Okay. Next, fourth round. Intellect has an enormous development in this round. The hitherto dumb races acquire our present human speech on this globe, on which, from the fourth race, language is perfected and knowledge increases. So, do we have time? Let's see. Let's look at. We'll just read this and then that'll be it for this time. Can we get a reader, please? This on the development of speech during this fourth round.
Vivian, can you read that for us, please?
Language could not be well developed before the full acquisition and development of humanity's reasoning faculties. Monosyllabic speech was the vowel parent of the monosyllabic languages, mixed with hard consonants, still in use amongst the yellow races, which are known to the anthropologist. 2. These linguistic characteristics developed into the agglutinative languages. The latter were spoken by some Atlantean races, while other parent stocks of the fourth race preserved the mother language. And as languages have their cyclic evolution, their childhood, purity, growth, fall into matter, admixture with other languages, maturity, decay, and finally death, with a cross, so the primitive speech of the most civilized Atlantean races, that language which is referred to as Rakshasi Bhasa in old Sanskrit works, decayed and almost died out, while the cream of the fourth race gravitated more and more toward the apex of physical and intellectual evolution, thus leaving as an heirloom to the nascent fifth, the Aryan race, the inflectional, highly developed languages, the agglutinative decayed and remained as a fragmentary fossil idiom, scattered now and nearly limited to the Aboriginal tribes of America. And this is the note with the cross. Language is certainly coeval with reason and could never have been developed before men became one with the informing principles in them, those who fructified and awoke to life the monastic element dormant in primitive man. For, as Professor Max Müller tells us in his Science of Thought, thought and language are identical. Yet to add to this the reflection that thoughts which are too deep for words do not really exist at all is rather risky, as thought impressed upon the astral tablets exists in eternity, whether expressed or not.
Thank you, Viviane. Okay, I want to real quickly finish up here so that we can move on next time. This is the last of this letter. So next, at this halfway point of the fourth round, as of the fourth root or Atlantean race, humanity passes the axial point of the minor Manvantara cycle, the world teeming with the results of intellectual activity and spiritual decrease. So a major Manvantara is a chain. The minor Manvantara here cited is the fourth round. This is the most material point in the entire Earth scheme. Two factors, dense materiality and the activation of manas, led to the decrease of humanity's natural spiritual state, which is why the Dark Brotherhood chose that time to overwhelm the fourth root race. And so next up will be at the very tail end. Let me look here. See, we're just through this. And that's it. That'll be the end of this is the last paragraph. So we're real close to the end of this particular little interim chapter that we've been on for about a year. So any final thoughts or questions? Do you want to give us dates for next time?
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. The next Secret Doctrine is going to be on the 19th of November. And the next Secret Teaching of All Ages is going to be before that on the 5th of November. And you just had a treatise on cosmic fire the other day.
So about a week and a half. Yeah.
No, because that will be the date of the pre-full moon. So the next cosmic fire won't be until 10 November.
Oh, we're just jumping it? We're not rescheduling it?
Well, no, because that's when you do the pre-full moon and between all the other webinars and stuff that we have.
That's just the way it is. Yeah, that happens once in a while. We just have to let something go. Too bad.
That's right. That's right. And we have so many other webinars because you alternate that Friday period with the dissipation of glamour. And then
so we can't
Tuia also does the right, yeah. And then Tuia also does the she gets some triangles in there, she gets the glamour, she gets the reappearance of the Christ, she gets the money for hierarchy in there. And lately she's been doing the vigil for the warring factors, and the safety of the souls on earth. We don't look at the right or wrong of these factors. We look at the souls of the people impacted and the healing that we can do.
She's
from the soul levels.
The amount of offering she gives is just over the top. It's incredible what Tuia offers. So, okay, so we'll have that. We'll have a little break, but at any rate, the very next thing, therefore, is Secret Teachings of All Ages on the, did you say the 5th of November?
November, yes.
5th of
Yes.
November. So that's good. I finally catch up. All right,
Yeah,
you
kick
all.
back, put your feet up.
Oh, yeah, sure. That's what I'll do. Okay, well, I'm going to read your chats now. Thank you all so very much for appearing. Some of this material can be quite complicated, and but usually we're able to get at least some idea of what HPB is talking about. So thanks for your attendance, and we'll see you either on the 5th or at the next Secret Doctrine webinar. Okay, till then, bye-bye.
Goodbye, everybody. Francis, I'll send you the chats.
Oh, okay, that's great.
All right, let me.